High on the slopes of K2, above 8,000 meters, one woman sat in a snow cave, unable to see any features of the surrounding mountain. She was snowblind. Chantel Maudiuit would carve her name into both history and controversy on the savage mountain. Chantel was unlike any other climber of her time. Some revered her as a fearless French woman who would take on any challenging peak, but some whispered about her manipulating others into carrying her supplies, fixing her ropes, and even using seduction to gain an advantage on the mountains. But when she set her sights on K2, those whispers began to follow her up the mountain, talk of decisions that would leave even seasoned mountaineers questioning what really happened in the death zone. What began as a bold solo climb soon spiraled into one of the most debated moments in high-altitude history. Chantel put herself in a position that should have led to death, but instead, she used others to blur the lines between triumph and tragedy beyond recognition, to the point that she earned the nickname, the Black Widow. This is her story. Chantel Maudiuit was one of the most controversial figures in the world of mountaineering. However, there is no doubt that she had a profound impact on the sport. Born in France in 1964, she began climbing in the French Alps at the age of 15 after her mother passed away from cancer. She quickly established a reputation as a highly talented alpinist. By 17, she had already climbed the north face of the Grand Joris, the Druze, and the Matterhorn. While others trained with large teams, Chantel preferred to go alone. She called it purity, climbing without guides, without oxygen, without compromise. She believed every summit should be earned through suffering, embracing traditional alpine-style climbing. By the 1990s, she had joined the French National Mountaineering Association. She quickly became known for her ability to acclimate rapidly, being able to function in high altitudes better than most male climbers of her generation. It was because of this that she was invited to climb the world's highest peak, Mount Everest. Although their expedition never reached the summit, that climb changed Chantel. From that point forward, she decided to focus only on 8,000-meter peaks. In 1991, she attempted to climb Everest again, but this is when the first controversy of her career would occur. Chantel was always popular in base camp and would use her charm to her advantage. During the 1991 expedition, two climbers began fighting each other over her, but she leaned toward an American climber, Thor Kieser. The pair would start dating the same year. After another unsuccessful attempt to summit Everest, Thor and Chantel decided to travel to Argentina together to climb Mount Fitzroy. During the trip, Chantel convinced Thor to cover her travel and climbing fees, as she was low on funds, and he agreed to help her out. Their climb proved to be challenging from start to finish, putting their relationship to the test. So much so that Chantel insisted to Thor that their relationship could not survive unless they reached the summit by a specific day. Thor exhausted himself, leading the way, fixing all of Chantel's mistakes along the ascent. Around 11 p.m., Thor was close to the summit when he slipped on a rock ledge and fell over 20 meters, tearing his eyelid and breaking his right arm in multiple places. Another group of climbers assisted Thor back to base camp, but Chantel told him she was not finished climbing. She planned to join another team the next day. Before leaving him at base camp, her final words to Thor were, "I no longer love you." In 1992, Chantel began preparing for a climb of K2, also known as the Savage Mountain. K2, being the second tallest mountain in the world, is known for its technical climbing and is significantly more difficult than Everest. Chantel would be joining a Swiss climbing team that planned to summit the mountain using alpine style. However, other teams quickly noticed that Chantel and her team were utilizing ropes that had been set up by others. Additionally, Chantel persuaded some of her teammates to carry her backpack, as it was too heavy for her. But Chantel quickly realized that the Swiss team was not acclimatizing fast enough for her, and they would not be ready for a summit push soon. So instead, she decided to break Pakistani law and secretly join a Soviet-American team. This team was made up of legendary climber Ed Visturs, Neil Badelman, and you guessed it, her ex-boyfriend, Thor Kaiser. As the team progressed up the mountain in late July, Ed and Neil became concerned about the weather and decided to turn back on the lower slopes, leaving Thor and Chantel to continue the climb. Although the duo was prepared for the ascent, they began leaving gear behind as they reached Camp 4 to move faster at high altitudes. On August 2nd, the group finally arrived at Camp 4, where they met Vladimir Belaberden and Gennady Kopeka, two climbers who were descending after summiting via the Abruzzi Spur. They left a tent and a sleeping bag for another climber, Alexei Nikiforov, who would be making a summit attempt at the same time as Thor and Chantel. Summit day arrived, and Thor woke up before sunrise to start climbing, making a path from Camp 4 up towards the bottleneck. The snow was about half a meter thick, and Alexei was following close behind Thor. Chantel was the last to leave camp, departing shortly after Thor and Alexei. About 200 meters from the top, Thor felt exhausted, realizing that he had used all his energy trailblazing. He found himself alone, his body failing him, and made the difficult decision to abandon his summit bid. As Chantel climbed, she quickly caught up with the slower Alexei at the bottleneck, passing him and soon after running into Thor on his way down. She yelled, "Thor, come up with me. We'll summit together," but Thor was too exhausted to continue and responded that he would wait for her at Camp 4. On August 3rd, 1992, Chantel, utilizing her impressive high-altitude abilities and the trail Thor had blazed, reached the summit of K2 at 5 p.m., becoming the fourth woman to do so. However, the achievement was bittersweet. She was exhausted and had lost her sunglasses during the climb, leaving her eyes unprotected. By the time she reached the summit, she was nearly snowblind. Chantel had experienced summit fever, the overwhelming desire to push her body beyond its limits to achieve the goal of standing atop the mountain, yet failing to conserve enough energy for a safe descent. The climb down for Chantel was painstakingly slow. After several hours, she crawled into a snow cave that had been dug out 2 days earlier by Vladimir, the same climber they had encountered at Camp 4. She sat, huddled in the cave, somewhere above 8,000 meters, unable to see when the worst possible scenario occurred. A storm began whirling around her. But then something unexpected happened. Alexei stumbled into the same cave on his way down. He saw Chantel and urged her to continue the descent, even though he was exhausted himself. He managed to get her standing, but she was suffering from frostbite on her hands and feet. Still, they spent the next few hours descending towards the bottleneck. During their descent, Chantel kept dozing off, and Alexei had to keep waking her. As they neared Camp 4, Alexei was suffering from altitude sickness and exhaustion himself, which led to errors. He slipped and nearly tumbled down the slopes, but this realization made him push ahead, and he would finally reach Camp 4, stumbling into Thor's tent on the verge of death. Thor would ask him where Chantel was, and his response was that she was right behind him. About 45 minutes later, Thor heard the crunch of snow outside, only to find Chantel stumbling towards the tent with her hands out in front of her, walking like a child. She could not see, but she had miraculously made it back to Camp 4. Thor would pull her into the tent and remove her boots, noticing that her feet were badly frostbitten. He would make tea and some soup and began feeding it to both climbers. They would spend 3 days at Camp 4 before Thor realized they were not going to significantly improve at that altitude. He had to find a way to get 2 dying climbers who were badly injured down from 8,000 meters on one of the most technical mountains in the world. The next afternoon, the 3 climbers started their descent. Chantel could barely walk, so Alexei and Thor would support her, carrying her a few meters, sit down to rest, then repeat the process. In 3 hours, they covered only 60 meters. Thor realized descending at this rate would not work and set up a tent for Chantel. Alexei would decide to continue his descent down the mountain. Thor and Chantel would spend another night at 8,000 meters. The following day, the weather had improved, and Thor radioed down to Ed and Scott Fisher, who were at Camp 3, and informed them of their location and condition. Ed relayed back a message stating that Alexei had reached them during the night, and had recovered quickly, even volunteering to head back up to Thor and Chantel to help them descend. It took hours, but Ed and Scott eventually reached Thor and Chantel after nearly losing their lives in an avalanche. By this point, Chantel was barely conscious, so the group tied a rope around her and began to lower her down the slope slowly. It took a full 2 days before they finally reached Camp 1. There, Chantel began to improve, insisting that she climb down to base camp without assistance. After her descent, Chantel recounted the entire expedition, but never mentioned how Ed and Scott had helped her. Instead, she only remarked that her eyes hurt. She also recalled the warm welcome she received at base camp, as if she were a returning hero. Although she was issued a fine for climbing without permission, she tore it up on her way out of Pakistan. When she returned to France, Chantel was hailed as a national hero. However, within the climbing community, many whispered about the real story behind the expedition. Ed later wrote in his book, "No Shortcuts to the Top," so now Chantel was celebrating with the Russians. We'd hear their cheers and revelry as we lay silent in our tents. Scott and I hadn't been invited to the party. After the K2 expedition, Chantel went on to summit Shishapangma and Cho Oyu without supplemental oxygen in 1993. In 1996, she climbed Lhotse and reached the summit, but her achievement was questioned because she was alone, and the timeline of her ascent did not add up. During this climb, Chantel also witnessed the 1996 Everest disaster firsthand, which resulted in the death of Scott Fisher, the climber who had previously saved her on K2. Ed was one of the leading voices, claiming that Chantel could not have summited Lhotse, suggesting that her sponsors were likely pressuring her to succeed, following another failed Everest attempt in 1995. Despite these doubts, her summit was officially recognized, and she became the first woman to reach the summit. Just 2 weeks later, she also summited Manaslu, once again achieving the top alone. Between 1989 and 1995, Chantel attempted to climb Mount Everest multiple times without the use of bottled oxygen. During her final attempt in 1995, she was unable to reach the summit and collapsed at a high altitude, likely due to exhaustion or altitude sickness. Other climbers assisted in bringing her down the mountain. This incident raised concerns within the mountaineering community and reinforced the perception that she sometimes depended heavily on others in high-risk situations. In May of 1988, Chantel set out to climb Dhaulagiri, the 7th highest mountain in the world at 8,167 meters. Located in western Nepal, the peak is notorious for its steep terrain, frequent avalanches, and extreme isolation. It is considered one of the more dangerous 8,000-meter peaks, with a lower success and higher fatality rate than most. She was part of a Spanish-led expedition and was climbing with her regular partner, Sherpa Ang Chashiring. They established Camp 2 at around 21,120 feet, or 6,400 meters, and prepared for their summit push. However, during that push, other teams had retreated back to base camp due to worsening weather and avalanche dangers. Yet Chantel and her Sherpa stayed in Camp 2. On May 11th, an Italian team was making their way back up to Camp 2 when they found Chantel and Chashiring's tent covered in snow. Their bodies were inside. An autopsy conducted in France revealed that Chantel died of a broken neck, likely caused by an avalanche while she slept. Her body was cremated, while it was determined that Chashiring had died from suffocation, consistent with being caught in an avalanche. Chantel's approach to mountaineering was unique. She emphasized personal experience rather than relying solely on large expeditions. Her infectious optimism and ease in the mountains won her much adoration, and everyone loved her for her cheerful character. After her passing, friends and family established the association Chantel Maudiuit Namaste, which founded a school in Kathmandu to honor her generosity toward the Nepalese communities. While Chantel was undoubtedly a controversial figure in the mountaineering world, there is no question that she had more raw talent than most. But natural talent only takes you so far in the mountaineering world. If you made it this far in the video, First off, thank you. If you enjoyed it, consider subscribing, as over 74% of all my viewers are not subscribed to the channel, and it truly does help me create more content for you all. Until next time.